Hey everyone, welcome to Youth Bombs. I'm Craig.
I'm Holden.
And we're the voice of young conservatives in Alachua County. Bitcoin has exploded to over $100,000 per coin. I'm very happy about this. I'm an investor in Bitcoin. Holden is a new believer in Bitcoin, longtime follower of Bitcoin. How do you feel about Bitcoin in general, its growth, and where it's at now?
Well, I mean, the thing with Bitcoin, I hate to be a guy who gets on whenever it's going up, and I understand that's what the vast majority of people do, regardless of whatever it is, generally because they think they're going to get rich if they buy something. So I hate to be this guy. I think there's a lot of people in here that are not the type of people that you want for longer term investments. So that kind of is annoying, but the underlying functions or the underlying utility that Bitcoin has is enormous to the world. So that's what is it actually has the properties of money very well, better than any other commodity on the planet. So it could actually function as money. So that's why, yeah.
Understandable. And for those who haven't read the Bitcoin standard, what are the properties of money?
Money needs to be divisible, portable, recognizable, durable, and scarce. It also has to be a unit of account, a medium of exchange, and a store value. All right, so a unit of account is basically a unit of measurement to measure what the cost of a good or service actually is. And if you actually try and do that as a grocery store right now in Bitcoin, it's not going to work out for you very well. Right now, Bitcoin is a terrible unit of account, and it's a terrible medium of exchange for smaller transactions, to buy coffee, to buy groceries, or to buy a chair or anything off of Amazon generally. Bitcoin is not going to be able to function that in a cheap and fast way. So it's not a good medium of exchange and unit of account right now. I think that is very easy to actually overcome, which was my objection about Bitcoin. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting things about Bitcoin, but those are the properties that money has to have in order to be good money. But it's not a good money right now, but I think it will being great money eventually.
Okay, and what could be done to make it great money and see the success you'd like it to have?
Well, it needs to accumulate a huge cash balance. So right now, Bitcoin is something like 2.5 trillion or something around there. It needs to dominate the vast majority of global cash balances for it to be money. So that'll make it so that it's got to be at least $100 trillion asset class for it to have to function well as a unit of account. And so that's going to be a long time from now. How long? I don't know. The sooner the better. The sooner we could get rid of the fiat inflationary fake money that the government creates, the better. The less mass murder, the less destruction. So the better that the faster Bitcoin is adopted, in my opinion, the better for the world. That will make it a good money. So what you could do with Bitcoin, obviously it has the Lightning Network that you could go on for smaller transactions if you'd like to, which is very interesting. And there's also different protocols that could change to make it even cheaper and faster without a trusted third party. But actually, capitalism is basically built off of third parties, if you really think about it. The insurance industry, so much of even buying stuff with a credit card, it's just so much stuff is dependent upon third parties. So what Bitcoin could actually do is most gold coins, most money, even in the late 19th century in the United States that was exchanged was not, generally speaking, like something like a gold coin, right? It was what's called a money certificate. Okay. And so it's actually, you deposit your money at a bank and they give you a note that says you have X amount of gold. And so you could go buy coffee or you could go buy something smaller from the marketplace, and it functions much better as a medium of exchange. So with Bitcoin, you could do the exact same thing, actually. You could go to your bank and you could say, hey, we're going to deposit X amount of Bitcoin. And they could write you a note that's an IOU that would function as a money certificate in the marketplace, and that could function as a medium of exchange. So that actually would be fantastic money if it could do that. So, and you could also do it digitally. You could have a digital certificate from a bank that says, I have ownership of X amount of Bitcoin, and you could exchange that very cheap and very fast. And so it could function very well as a medium of exchange. It's very divisible. It's very portable. So it's very fungible. So it's got the properties you need it, and medium of exchange, it's got that too. If it's got that. So that's very encouraging about Bitcoin.
Gotcha. I think to a certain extent it has those properties. For instance, you can self-custody in a wallet that you own where you own the device that the Bitcoin is stored in.
Right.
And it is yours. You access it with the device on your computer. Or you can use something like Coinbase, which is a trading platform for crypto, but could also potentially act as a sort of bank. And I think if you look at the El Salvador model, that's been very interesting because they have adopted Bitcoin with success. And I think it's going to take, to get even greater adoption, governments using it as a secondary currency and encouraging its use.
I think that it just needs. What's going to end up happening is the market is going to have capital flow into it. Governments coming into it. Governments can try and make iron money, but it's not going to work out because it'll just be overproduced, and you'll just make the miners of copper. I think I said copper or iron. Iron. It'll just make the miners of iron rich. Right. So Bitcoin, you can't do that because it's programmed in a way so that you can't do that. But I think it's just going to be institutional adoption, and people across the world. Bitcoin has a huge value proposition. If you're in Venezuela and you know that you earn money and it's going to lose 50% of its value in 2 weeks, you probably want to go ahead and buy something that's going to store your economic power or economic purchasing power in something. And Bitcoin can solve that problem. For the average person in the world, the currency supply expansion rate is 14%, right? Weighted, it's 14%. The average actually is more than 30%. So there's just constant inflation everywhere. And while these central banks are inflating, Bitcoin proposes a huge value proposition for these guys. So I think that'll help adoption, because after all, it's trying to solve problems for people. That's what Bitcoin is here for. So I think that'll drive adoption. I think the fact that if you're Microsoft or Amazon or Google or Apple, you have hundreds of billions of dollars of cash, or over $100 billion of cash, and you're losing, $7 billion a year of shareholder value from the inflation tax, and you need to save yourself somehow. So I think that'll drive adoption eventually. And I mean, that's a huge, just imagine, like, you're burning $7 billion of shareholder value. If someone lit a match on $7 billion of your cash a year, that's what's happening. The government is stealing their money. So I think Bitcoin is going to drive adoption that way. Eventually, I think it's going to take a long time for it to happen just because of how hard that process is, explaining the value proposition. It's actually, it's not easy to understand. Most people don't understand the value proposition of Bitcoin. Actually, most people who hold Bitcoin, generally speaking, don't even understand the value proposition that it truly has, which is very large. So it's something that you need to understand why it has such enormous value or utility to offer to the world. So I think once the education takes place, most people will it'll be adopted. And once it is adopted and it's the vast majority of global cash balances, that's it. It doesn't matter what the US government thinks. It doesn't matter what Jerome Powell thinks. It doesn't matter what the ECB thinks. They could crap on Bitcoin and it won't matter.
Gotcha. And given that Bitcoin has been around for 15 plus years, I'm a believer in it, but why has it taken so long to get the institutional adoption that it has, where we've only in the just past year had ETFs available to buy Bitcoin rather than, going to Coinbase or something. So can it grow from here?
Yeah, if it doesn't grow, then it's going to be useless effectively, because I wouldn't say useless, but it's not going to be useful unless it's the vast majority of global cash balances. And so if it's not the vast majority of global cash balances, it's going to be a horrible unit of account. Money has to be a unit of account. If it's not a unit of account, I can't lend in the currency and expect to get something reasonably back in return that I'm aware of in the future. If I lend you $1,000 for 2 years, I want to know that I get back slightly more than $1,000 at least, right? With Bitcoin, it's all over the place. You don't know what it's going to be worth 2 years from now. It can't function. People have to be able to lend in the currency. They have to be able to price their goods and services in the currency and expect to be able to make profits at slim margins, right? So the price can't fluctuate more than 2% a day. Like, it's not going to work out for a currency. So Bitcoin has to have a huge amount of cash balances go into it. I do think that's going to happen because it's just better. So if Microsoft went to 3 times earnings and it paid a 20% dividend, then capital will flow into Microsoft. It's the same with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is almost perfect money. So capital is going to flow. Cash balances will flow into Bitcoin. And I think that's exciting because the faster we get away from this fiat Ponzi scheme, the better.
Understandable. Yeah, because we know that inflation, it's effectively a tax. It's robbing us of our money. And Bitcoin, there's a fixed supply, which is advantageous. 21 million there will ever be. And the last of it will be mined in the 2100s. So it has a long span to go for sure.
Yeah, but even now, I think it just passed gold's stock to flow ratio. It has the highest stock to flow ratio of any commodity on the planet. So,
wow.
So it's literally the hardest commodity ever invented. With all these other crap coins, you don't know for sure what the supply is going to be, what the protocol is going to be. You know for sure what the nodes and the miners, they want to make sure that the integrity of the network is maintained. And I don't expect, there's never been a fraudulent transaction ever verified. The supply has been the same protocol since the beginning, the same programmed protocol since the beginning. It's been continuing to expand at the expected rate, and there's not really any good reason to expect that would change in the future. And before you know it, I think it's going to become the best money. But at the same time, it's not going to happen overnight either. It's going to take massive adoption. I think like a lot of the people who promote Bitcoin, unfortunately, have to get along with regulators, like companies that buy Bitcoin. So they just offer it as a store value, and they say, "Oh, the dollar and Bitcoin could be friends." In reality, it's going to be competition, and we know the government hates competition. So, but I think it's going to be too late. The government eventually, Bitcoin is going to dominate so many of cash balances that it's not really going to be a decision that governments can really make anymore. And you could self-custody your Bitcoin, so there's not really anything they could do about it. So, I mean, they could stop Bitcoin mining, but that's just going to make it even harder to produce more of it, right? So, and they're going to still figure out a way to do it, most likely. So, yeah, I mean, I think the future for Bitcoin is bright, and Bitcoin is going to make the world way better than it is right now. I actually think most cash balances will be stored in self-custody and not at a financial institution, just because why would you? There's no real point. You could just hold your Bitcoin as self-custody. I expect just cash balances, right? Or not cash balances. I expect spending money, specifically just money that you want to spend for the month or the week or whatever, to be held at a bank, and or they'll hold your Bitcoin and they'll just give you money certificates, is what it's called, for your Bitcoin, and it could just function as a medium of exchange for you digitally. So yeah.
Gotcha. And I think there's also the power of the network in terms of user adoption. So the more people that use it, the more valuable it is, just like the internet. Exponential growth with the internet. We're seeing a similar chart with Bitcoin. It is growing in adoption and it grows in value. So that's really key there.
Yeah.
Regarding the self-custody, a lot of people, it needs to be made easier because many people don't necessarily understand it. I have friends with Bitcoin, and I often have to show them, here's how you use your Trezor device, because it's rather complicated for someone who isn't into tech in Bitcoin. I think that it can be made easier, but right now that's definitely a hurdle that has to be overcome. And a lot of times I just say to people, if you like, I'm happy to help you with self-custody, but you might just want to start with Coinbase a bit, and then we can move it to self-custody later.
I would never hold it with any of these institutions. I would just self-custody my Bitcoin. If I wouldn't buy the ETFs, really, if I wouldn't buy MicroStrategy stock, I wouldn't do it. I would just self-custody because I want to know. I hold Bitcoin for 100 years. I'm going to have that Bitcoin, right? That's what Bitcoin is the thing that you want to hold for 50 years, because cash balances are going to flow into it. This is not something that you want. So that's right now, at least. Eventually, what's going to happen when Bitcoin dominates the vast majority of global cash balances and it demonetizes government bonds, then it's going to be appreciating at like 5% a year, which is not going to be much, right? But as far as it is right now, to get to that point, it's got to go 25, 30% a year. Up and up and up. Obviously, it's not going to go up in a straight line. There's going to be volatility along the way, quite a bit. So, but yeah, that's what's going to happen with Bitcoin. I would just self custody if it's me, and I would not buy Bitcoin unless I understand the value proposition that it has. Really, if I haven't done 100 hours of research on Bitcoin, I probably wouldn't be buying it if I'm whoever it is.
Understandable. You gotta know what you're investing in for sure. That's really key because financial literacy is so important. Now, final question regarding the large altcoins like Ethereum. Is there any hope, any future for them?
No.
Okay.
They're all effectively unregistered securities. Bitcoin is special because it's a commodity, not a security, right? Like that's something that Bitcoin is different from all these other guys. Bitcoin is a protocol that doesn't have a CEO. It doesn't have a board of directors. It's just there. You could be your own bank, right? It's effectively it was the first invention where you have digital money where that doesn't have it's completely peer to peer. So that's let's go Bitcoin. Nothing else. I mean, obviously the stable coins could like Tether, like they could have those guys obviously could have some value, but Ethereum is going to go to zero in my opinion. Basically every other crypto is just basically a scam. I wouldn't even think about buying it.
Gotcha. And I used to be a believer in a lot of these altcoins. I thought, there's potential here. They could really grow. This is an alternative use for things. Just like, for example, there was one coin that I have no interest in anymore that would have tracked supply chains via the blockchain. I don't see the utility. It's not succeeding. I think that Bitcoin has the properties to succeed given its decentralization and unit of account and store of value.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll see. We'll see about unit of account. It's not there right now yet, but yeah, I'm totally with you. There's no reason to look at all these other scam crypto projects unless you want to engage in massive speculation. And if you want to do that, knock yourself out. Just you donate your money to something else useful, probably would be better off, or just burn it. So yeah.
Makes sense. That being said, thanks everyone so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We upload 3 times a week. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to reach out to us, feel free at youthbombs@alatrarepublicans.com. Thanks so much, everyone.